As people are settling in, I just need to provide some housekeeping for after this event. As you know, we have a lineup of events today, this morning, now, and after this there will be the FCLP meeting. It will be here, and it's not for everyone, I guess, but those who are invited to that meeting, it's going to be here. But what we would like is at the end of this meeting for everybody to go into the reception area, because they will have to put a wall here for that meeting. And I think that's the only housekeeping item that I have here. Any other housekeeping? Good? All right, so let's get started. It's been a great day, a lineup of amazing events. And this morning we were at the St. James Palace with the Prince of Wales, and it was a great event. Just for those who are not there, I just wanted to provide you with a quick update on what had happened there, something very unique, something historic. So for the first time, such a high-level event took place, and where the Prince of Wales convened top leaders from government, businesses, philanthropists, and indigenous leaders to make the connection of nature and the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. Those who were there would agree with me that we all left the room united for a call to action, actually, that they want to carry to COP30 and beyond. So there was a call to action that many organizations have signed. This is symbolic and a sense of unity that we need more than ever before. And the fact that we have been reflecting and seeing that the indigenous peoples and local communities are really critical if we want to achieve the global goals around climate and biodiversity. So really the call to action has been there, and I'm sure there will be something out around that, but it was just good to mention it here. All right, so let's get started with our event entitled Advancing Climate Goals, Territorial Protection and Funding for Indigenous Peoples, Local Communities, and Afro-descendant Peoples. And this event has been organized by the Minister of Indigenous Peoples, Brazil, and the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, also in partnership with the Rights and Resources Initiative, the Royal Foundation, Jacobs Futura Foundation, Forest Climate Leaders Partnership, and Tropical Forest Forever Facility, and of course supported by Campaign for Nature, and if not us, then who? For those who don't know me, my name is Solange. I am the President and Coordinator of the Rights and Resources Initiative, RRI. And I'm your humble moderator today and MC for this event. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. As we build momentum toward COP30 in the Brazilian Amazon, today's event shines a spotlight on one of the most urgent and effective climate strategies we have: securing the land rights of indigenous peoples, local communities, and Afro-descendant people. These communities are safeguarding the forests that safeguard our planet. Yet, they receive only a fraction of the recognition of resources needed. Today is part of a broader mutirao. I hope my Portuguese is sounding great. A collective global mobilization grounded in ancestral wisdom and climate justice. We are here to move from commitment to delivery and from pledges to progress. To set the stage of our conversation today, it is my great pleasure to welcome a visionary leader, Brazil's Minister of Indigenous People, Honorable Sonia Guajajara. Minister Sonia, welcome. Please join me in welcoming Minister Sonia.
Ok, muito obrigada, Solange. Por favor, tome seus tradutores. Rápido, rápido. Vou aguardar 30 segundos. Kleber, tu não precisa. Sim. Ok. Sim? Yes? Olá, boa tarde a todas e todos. Quero saudar aqui este momento em nome da Aliança Global de Povos e Comunidades Territoriais, aqui, né, GATC, como um parceiro fundamental nessa construção. Bom, agradeço muito a presença de vocês neste evento. É uma honra para mim e para todo o governo brasileiro poder coordenar mais um segmento de alto nível na busca de soluções para a crise climática global. Todos os nossos países estão vivendo os mesmos dilemas. Enquanto as emergências climáticas avançam e as chances de evitar que a temperatura do planeta ultrapasse a marca de 1,5 graus, estamos convivendo ainda com muitas restrições orçamentárias, com o aumento dos recursos para a guerra, com o avanço do negacionismo e também dos discursos de ódio, entre tantos outros desafios. Nós precisamos chegar na COP30 como uma COP de ação e de implementação, o que é óbvio para muitos de nós, mas, infelizmente, sabemos que é algo difícil ainda para alguns governos. Por isso é importante termos este momento aqui de diálogo sincero, para que possamos pensar em soluções reais. Nestes poucos minutos que tenho aqui, gostaria de apresentar alguns pontos estratégicos, de maneira simples e direta. Primeiro, e mais importante, por mais difícil que seja, não podemos desistir desta agenda. Nós temos que trabalhar sempre para manter os compromissos de nossos países, mesmo nas situações mais adversas. Segundo, nós precisamos cooperar. E fico feliz que, na sequência deste encontro, já haverá uma reunião técnica da plataforma do FCLP. E que há 2 dias, também aqui em Londres, o Comitê Interino de Povos Indígenas e Comunidades Tradicionais do TFFF também já estiveram reunidos. A conservação da biodiversidade, o enfrentamento das mudanças climáticas e o protagonismo dos povos indígenas não estavam no centro das políticas de 10 ou 15 anos atrás. E sabemos também que os compromissos das COPs são de difícil implementação. E se tudo isso era difícil, era mais difícil ainda pensar nesse momento que nós estamos agora, povos indígenas assumindo esse protagonismo, principalmente no que diz respeito a financiamento direto e implementação desses recursos pelas nossas próprias organizações. Então, nós estamos avançando, por isso não podemos desistir e celebrar todos os avanços que conquistamos. E é fundamental a cooperação para buscar soluções inovadoras. Soluções que sabemos também que não são fáceis. Temos que apostar em novas propostas, em novas ações e sermos resilientes neste momento de mais dificuldade. Novas propostas trazem dúvidas, trazem incertezas, mas precisamos seguir em frente, buscando acertar pelo caminho. Em particular, gostaria de reforçar que é hora, sim, de apostar na capacidade dos povos indígenas e das comunidades tradicionais, com nossos corpos e conhecimentos tradicionais, para a proteção das florestas e defesa do clima. Acreditar que nós podemos ser formuladores dos melhores projetos para a proteção dos territórios e que políticas públicas indigenistas criadas a partir das nossas experiências também já se mostraram como as mais efetivas. Talvez esteja aí, nesta aposta do protagonismo indígena, muitas das respostas que buscamos. Por isso, o Brasil está comprometido com o novo PLED. Nós levaremos a Belém nosso compromisso de proteção territorial. Temos políticas importantes de garantia da maior proteção, posse e uso dos territórios indígenas, que, de fato, podem ser decisivas para frear o desmatamento, enfrentar as mudanças climáticas e garantir direitos. Mas o Brasil também está comprometido e na liderança da criação de um novo mecanismo, o Fundo de Florestas Tropicais para Sempre, o famoso já TFFF, que pode representar uma virada e também um marco no financiamento global, principalmente se ele avançar na destinação de, no mínimo, 20% para povos indígenas e comunidades tradicionais de forma direta. Se com 1% dos recursos estes povos e comunidades protegem a maior parte da biodiversidade do planeta, o que será possível fazer com volumes maiores, mesmo em tempos difíceis? Temos muito a fazer. Hoje, os territórios indígenas no Brasil abarcam quase 14% do território brasileiro. Mas precisamos ainda retirar invasores, como extração de madeira ilegal, garimpo, mineração ilegal nos territórios indígenas, e evitar ações que degradam a biodiversidade. Avançar na segurança jurídica dos territórios, apoiar a bioeconomia e apoiar o fortalecimento dos modos de vida e utilização dos conhecimentos tradicionais para a conservação e usufruto sustentável dos territórios. Para cada uma destas ações, já temos políticas desenhadas e estamos fechando nossas metas também para os próximos 5 anos. É possível vincular todas estas políticas, bem como os projetos desenvolvidos diretamente pelas organizações indígenas, às metas globais do Marco Global da Biodiversidade, do Balanço Global do Clima e dos recém-aprovados Objetivos Gerais de Adaptação. Essas políticas nacionais serão as bases dos nossos compromissos de proteção territorial. Por isso, neste momento, eu convoco os demais países a também fazerem seus compromissos financeiros ou territoriais. É preciso manter essa agenda como prioridade para dar ao mundo o sinal de que precisamos urgentemente iniciar um grande ciclo de ação e implementação climática. O encontro que tivemos agora pela manhã, já mencionado aqui pela Solange, no Palácio St. James, já foi um desses sinais. O evento promovido pela Fundação Real do Príncipe e da Princesa de Gales reuniu governos, filantropias e lideranças indígenas para reforçar o compromisso de todos, não apenas pela preservação das florestas e pela defesa dos territórios, mas também pela garantia do apoio direto para organizações indígenas e de comunidades tradicionais e afrodescendentes. E apoio financeiro direto é uma demanda para todas as diferentes iniciativas, mecanismos e fundos climáticos, como o FCLP, o FTFG e o TFFF. Juntos, lançamos um chamado para ação, que agora precisa ser ampliado e ter apoio de todos. Contem com o Brasil. Nos próximos meses, faremos novas rodadas como estas para avançar nos compromissos de todos nós e, de maneira conjunta, nos fortalecermos para o desafio urgente e necessário de enfrentar as mudanças climáticas, aumentar o protagonismo indígena, valorizar a Mãe Terra e a vida no planeta. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much, Minister Sonia, for grounding us in both the urgency and possibility of this moment. And now we will turn into a dynamic panel of leaders from government, frontline communities, and philanthropy. So what we will do with this panel, we will explore why this moment is pivotal for land rights, what progress has been made, and where gaps persist, and how we align political and financial momentum ahead of COP30. So I would like to call on the speakers to come over here. First, Honorable Elena Estrada, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia. Is she around? Lord Doug Goldsmith, Senior Fellow, Bezos Earth Fund. My sister, Hindu Umaru Ibrahim, Coordinator, Indigenous Women and Peoples Association of Chad. Okay, I think I'll sit in the middle. We have Michael Northrop, Director, Rockefeller Brothers Fund. Yeah. You can sit here, I'll sit in the middle, yeah. And we have Eileen Lee, Chief Program Officer, Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and FCLP. All right. You would agree with me that if you have such high-level people with you, it would be most of the time difficult to keep up with time. But I will request if you can please help us with the time. Take 5 minutes to answer the questions. Then, yeah, we have 1 hour together, actually. I think we do have enough time, right? We do have enough time, yep. Okay, let's wait until Minister put her head on. What else? Okay, let me speak so she will. It's good? Okay, the channel. Two, dos. ¿Es bien? Muy bien? Good. All right, thank you very much for joining. And we have one of the panelists who will speak Spanish. So when Minister starts, you can use your headset. Everybody here who doesn't speak Spanish. And I will start with Minister Honorable Lena Estrada. Thank you for joining us. And Minister, Colombia has emerged as a leader in aligning climate goals with territorial governance. What lessons can be drawn from your national experience on recognizing collective land rights as a pillar to climate strategy. Can you describe a case where legal land recognition has helped communities protect ecosystem or reduce emissions?
Buenos días a todos los compañeros, autoridades que están aquí, hermana Hindu. Gracias a todos por este espacio de diálogo. Quiero contarles que en Colombia nosotros tenemos una experiencia de la que nos sentimos muy orgullosos porque hemos avanzado bastante en el marco del reconocimiento al derecho de los pueblos indígenas, pero no solo de los pueblos indígenas, sino también de los pueblos afrodescendientes, raizales, y en este momento también en el marco del cumplimiento de los acuerdos de paz, también avanzamos en la integración de los campesinos y el reconocimiento de los derechos de los campesinos, en el sentido en el que se están reconociendo los territorios indígenas y los territorios de todas las otras poblaciones que históricamente han sido vulnerables. Eso es muy importante porque al reconocer los territorios nosotros estamos brindando una protección a la biodiversidad, a los ecosistemas, y esto va muy atado a la meta número 3 que nosotros tanto luchamos. Hindu, tú sabes que cuando fuimos a firmar el convenio de biodiversidad biológica luchamos mucho para que se integrara en la meta número 3 del CBD los territorios indígenas, porque es muy importante que los estados, antes que seguir nombrando áreas protegidas, áreas de conservación o parques nacionales, puedan determinar y darle una legalidad a lo que son los territorios indígenas, pero asimismo dar una autonomía en la administración de los recursos. Eso se ha logrado en Colombia. En este último mes, el gobierno le ha dado la autonomía administrativa, lo cual se llaman las entidades territoriales indígenas, a los pueblos indígenas, lo que pone a los territorios indígenas en el mismo nivel que las municipalidades o los departamentos. Entonces, el marco normativo nuestro se ha fortalecido y hemos sido muy garantes en este proceso de reconocimiento legal, y por eso queremos liderar este proceso de que si hay recursos, lo primero que tenemos que hacer es comprar tierras para garantizar la protección de la biodiversidad y garantizar que tengamos una barrera a enfrentar el cambio climático. También tenemos esas lecciones para compartirle al mundo, pero sobre todo este reconocimiento legal no es suficiente, sino que también necesitamos que todos los aliados nos ayuden a que ese financiamiento que llega para los pueblos indígenas llegue de manera directa a las autoridades de base, a esas autoridades que siempre han protegido los territorios, y eso implica eliminar los intermediarios que siempre han estado en representación de nosotros y manejando los recursos que deben de llegar a los pueblos indígenas, y de esta manera le damos un respeto a la gobernanza y a la gobernabilidad de los pueblos indígenas. Así que queremos cumplir de esta manera, estamos cumpliendo con los acuerdos de París, con el marco global de biodiversidad, garantizando los derechos colectivos sobre los territorios y la financiación directa para que se fortalezca la gobernanza.
Thank you very much. Definitely lots of positive development in Colombia, and it's something that we all appreciate. So now I'll turn into Lord Zach Goldsmith from the Bezos Earth Fund, but also a Member of Parliament in the UK that we generally forget because you're always with us, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
So you have been a champion of global forest protection, both in government, but also now with the Bezos Earth Fund. Can you please share a concrete example of how donor collaboration, whether through bilateral partnerships or philanthropic coalitions, has helped advance the rights of indigenous peoples, to land and forest?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me join this amazing panel. The first thing I want to say is that the Minister Sonia was talking about the financial gap, the financial needs, and she's right. But if you look at all of the global philanthropy, there's a lot of money flowing. The problem is that only a tiny fraction of that goes to the environment, and only a tiny fraction of what goes to the environment is actually about the environment. Much of it is about the kind of technological clean energy transition. So only a fraction goes to the actual environment. And of that tiny fraction, even tinier fraction, goes towards indigenous people, indigenous organizations, which makes no sense given that the vast majority of real conservation that's happening around the world is being done without any kind of payment, but is being done nevertheless by indigenous communities. Indigenous communities are responsible for almost all the good news stories we see around the world today. So all of that makes no sense. You know, the technological transition we're seeing is great. Obviously, it's exciting, but there's no technological substitute for complex ecological systems. There's no computer that can replace the Amazon or the Congo or great mangrove forests, seagrass, corals, and so on. So we've got to protect it, and that requires us to tip that ratio on its head so that we fund nature proportionately, but principally that we support indigenous communities. And I think we saw a start of that at COP26 with the pledge, which was the focus of the discussion today. And we were pleased at the time, I was pleased at the time, by the fact that we've secured a $1.5 billion pledge. The problem, as many people here know from their own experience, is that there's a kind of institutional lack of trust. Actually, Minister Sonia mentioned this as well. There's an institutional lack of trust in the capacity of indigenous communities to absorb and spend that money. So it goes through intermediaries, and a tiny percentage of it ends up on the front line at the grassroots. So there's a lot of talk today, yesterday, and will continue about renewing that pledge, which is phenomenally important, but just as important is a commitment from the philanthropists and governments. It's easier, I think, for philanthropists to take perceived risks, but governments as well, to make sure that money gets to the grassroots. It's not just the quantity, it is about the quality of how that money is spent. And the truth, I'm going to be very crude here, but given that there's a significant lack of resources, the cheapest way to buy the maximum amount of solution, I hate putting it in those terms, but that's what it is supporting the people who've been defending nature for years. That means establishing secure land rights, working with indigenous communities to ensure that the economic progress and development that they generate is, as it is, based on respectful coexistence with nature rather than extraction. Juan Carlos here is working on the creation of what will be, I hope, some kind of chamber of commerce for indigenous communities, which I think is hugely important. Minister Sonia is working on the TFFF, which is the biggest game in town. It's the most ambitious, audacious, Michael here knows a lot more about it than I do, plan which we just have to make sure succeeds. But one of the most successful examples, I think, of private finance, philanthropy, government support coming together to do something really good has been through the Tenure Facility. The Tenure Facility, as you can imagine, is about establishing land rights, and on a really big scale. It's an organization that has delivered real value for money. And there are lots of perhaps cleverer initiatives out there, more complicated initiatives out there, huge government programs that do, in some cases, very good things. But there's a simplicity to that program, which makes it very easy to measure its success. And so there are so many examples of projects that work, so it's very hard for me to give you one. But if I had to pick one, where we've seen a coming together of a great partnership, I think it's the Tenure Facility and similar types of initiatives. It's really about putting as much land as possible under the control of the people that we know we can all trust in the common interest to look after it.
And how can we accelerate, I'm just using the mic, how can we accelerate this effort towards COP30, which is coming up?
So, I mean, there are a number of things. So the first thing, the most important thing for COP30, in my view, is that the traditional donor sponsor countries get behind the Brazilian, the TFFF. That has to work. It's a $125 billion fund. It's not based on carbon. It's based on keeping forests alive, trying to tip the balance. At the moment, the incentives to destroy are about 40 times bigger than the incentives to protect. TFFF is not going to equalize that equation, but it'll take a big bite out of the problem. So if anyone here who's in any way linked to any government, not just the traditional governments, Germany, Norway, UK, but others as well, we need to put as much pressure on them as possible to just get behind the TFFF. It simply needs to succeed, and you won't get any of the private finance until you have the sponsors in place, so the sponsor countries really need to support it. I mean, there are lots of things I'd love to see come out of COP30, and lots of things I think we will see. But if there's one thing that I personally really, really hope we will all champion, it is the TFFF, because it just changes the playing field in a very dramatic way.
Well, thank you very much. And now I will turn into Hindu. Hindu, you've powerfully advocated for the integration of traditional knowledge and direct finance. What does climate leadership look like from the ground up, and what support do communities still need to scale up impact before COP30?
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, my treasure, Sir Solange, and thank you, Sonia, really, sister, with your team to organize this event here, and being in this panel with my sister also Lena here as minister, and with all the folks there is really a great honor. And of course, to come to your questions, what the leadership look like on the ground. I think the leadership look like this room on the ground. It look like the indigenous peoples can be ministers. Indigenous peoples can be a community leaders. Indigenous peoples can be fighters internationally or locally, or indigenous peoples can be, like my sister Nanette over there, leading also a fund. So the leadership on the ground is even harder. The diversity of indigenous women, indigenous youth that are fighting every single day to protect our land, to protect our territories. All of us want to get a solution for climate change. So this is really how diverse we can be, internationally, but also very locally, that fighting to get the solution, not only for us, but for the entire planet. That's the thing we have all to keep. When indigenous peoples fight to protect the land, territories, and resources, it's not only for them. As you all know, we protect how many forests, how many land, how many resources, all the ecosystem. So we are doing that for all the rest of the humanity. But of course, as Lena said, and also you well said, now, the money who's going to the communities is very, very little. And we have the concrete number now, and we have the data from the first pledge that so nicely set up. But how many went to the communities directly to get direct access finance is very little. So this is where we have to put our energy and where we have to build from now to go to the COP30. But to go to COP30, it's only 5 months. It's not a lot of time that we have. But from indigenous peoples, we are doing all our best. And you said also in the morning meeting there, we had the 3 Basin Congress as indigenous peoples. We meet, we have our strategy to take to the COP30. We meet in Bonn just before Minister Sonia came here, myself and others. We meet in Bonn to have the Indigenous Peoples Commission to talk about what is indigenous peoples are bringing to the COP30. We are here today with you in London, where we are jumping from one event to another one. So we are doing our part. But the part that is living is what is the state members are doing for indigenous peoples to COP30. We said the COP is going to indigenous home in Belém. So what are they going to do? Are they going to stand up, change the policies, enhance their NDCs, and take indigenous people's knowledge, wisdom, and write into the negotiation document as the just transitions, as the adaptation goal, as the Article 6 on the red. So in all those negotiation items, we wanted them to stand up and put what we want as indigenous peoples to allow us to do action on the ground. Secondly, the funders, and also including the developed countries. And now I can address to you as funder also. So how are you going to coordinate to get the real action as the 2.0 pledge for indigenous peoples? We see the wailing, we see the discussions around all the places. So what we want from now to the next 5 months is coming up with a clear plan. Who wanted to put how much? Who is going to recommit? But what new peoples can come also to do. And together, we can work again, hand to hand, to COP30, make an announcement, but monitor this money going now more to the communities. Monitor is going to the indigenous women. Monitor is going to protect the nature. Monitor with a proudness in the next year, we can give a good report that we get a 2.0 much better than the one who we started as a pilot.
And in terms of a concrete example, you from the Sahel, from Chad, can you share any projects on the ground that really you see it's worth sharing here that deal with climate resilience? Because I know it's a key topic in the Sahel.
Absolutely. Maybe many people know me as international person that going from one meeting to another one. But no. My source of energy is on the ground. That's where I'm working. That's where I belong. And that's where I'm going always to do action. My people are nomadic pastoralists, and they are still nomadic pastoralists. So one of the greater projects that I wanted to share with you, I'm doing a land mapping using a participatory mapping from a satellite image. The knowledge of indigenous peoples, putting them together and putting all the knowledge into the map, agreeing with the FPIC as process, and taking this map in as a photo to digitalize it. Is a way to combine science, technology, and indigenous people's knowledge, and making a land demarcation. It helps us not only to demarcate the land, but to build a resilience of the communities, because community can come with an action plan between them on how they can implement their restorations of the forests. For the first time, they give a woman land right. And those women doing agroecology, restoring the sacred tree that we have in our communities. And it's helped them to get the revenue, and it's helped them to send their kids to school. So one project can have a component of the changing of the society. And so proud that the last announcement we had in Brazzaville to support 9 women organizations with a direct access finance. That is going to help to enhance those kind of projects that we are doing on the ground. So when we have the pledge, it's going to the concrete way to help indigenous peoples who are using their knowledge to protect the land, but to also to restore all the dignity that we need. Living in dignity is access to the food, access to the resources, to the education, to the health, etc. And we know it better than anyone who gets a PhD, because we do have the PhD plus on all this restoration of the land in our ground.
Yeah, definitely. Before I go into Michael, just like, I met a woman in Chad, so we were talking about Hindu. And the woman said, well, Hindu is very linked to the communities here. And actually all the prices that she's getting around the world, the money, she's giving it directly to all the women's association out there. So I think that's something that we generally don't see, don't know, but I wanted to mention it here because it's really good. Well done. So now, Michael. This morning you talked about the Tropical Forest Forever facility. We heard Minister Sonia talking about it, and it's emerging as a major mechanism. So what progress has been made in mobilizing long-term finance? What are the main barriers to channeling resources directly to communities, and how do we overcome that? We all have been talking about it as a challenge. How do we overcome that?
Thank you, Solange. First, just thank you for having me up here in this amazing group. I'm really honored to be here. And as I look at this front row, I'm just amazed and struck that they're listening to me, because I really want to listen to them. So I don't want to repeat everything I said earlier today in the Palace, but I think the TFFF is a really significant moment for global transformation and global governance acceleration of innovative solutions. You know, there is a really interesting part to it, which is the finance part, which is, for those of you who don't know, and it's confusing, there's going to be a whole bunch of money that's going to be deposited and invested, $125 billion, if it can be raised. It will generate $4 billion of revenue that will go to countries that can use it to protect intact forests. There has become agreement, and this is fairly new, and I think everyone is accepting it now, that at least 20% of those proceeds will be directed to indigenous peoples and local communities. You do the math, that's $800 million a year. You know, we may not get all the way there, but take 25% of that, it would be amazing. And it'll be every year going forward. This is an idea that is supposed to be a trust fund that will continue potentially kind of infinitely. If we think about tenure, we think about rights, we think about legal needs, we think about mapping, those are a lot of resources that can help local communities and indigenous people do the things they need to do to formalize their place in the world. And so that is an incredibly important and exciting thing. There is a lot of discussion underway today about how this thing will be finalized. 3 weeks ago in Brazzaville, 350 indigenous leaders came together to try to figure out how they could interact with the TFFF. And the number one concern was that money would go to governments and never reach them. And people showed a great deal of concern. There was a moment when the meeting nearly kind of burned down. People were ready to leave, go home. This is going to be terrible. This is a nuclear bomb, somebody said, that's going to ruin our communities. And then everybody kind of turned a corner and began to solve problems and came up with a bunch of really good ideas for how the money could be more effectively directly allocated to indigenous peoples and local communities. And those ideas, and I probably can't do a good explanation quickly enough, but those ideas have moved to the World Bank and to the Brazilian steering group team, and they've basically accepted them, which is remarkable. And that itself is just an incredibly important evolution for how things get done in the world. There will be a negotiation between now and Belém about whether or not those proposals become reality or whether they will be watered down. And the people in the room who are making the decisions in that negotiation are government negotiators, and they get instructions from governments about what they can negotiate, and there will be opposition to this. So we don't have a lot of time to make sure that we get a good result. I think that the Colombian example is the front runner. You know, Colombia has said, we want the money to go directly to our indigenous people and local communities. We need other countries to stand with Colombia and say that also. And we need sponsor governments who are putting money into this thing to agree also. And I think the UK, you know, Zach Goldsmith has been a huge cheerleader for this across the British government quietly for the last several months. I think Norway, Germany will all be pretty supportive of this. But there's a lot of deference been given to Brazil, and they're kind of in charge. They're mostly supportive. but there's some concern there too. So how this ends up, I think, is kind of up to us to figure out how to make sure that these mechanisms for direct payment actually become the reality. And if they do, it is an explosion of innovation, for all of us. It is such a big deal. So it's really worth fighting for. And I know there are lots of people here who are working on tenure and, pledges towards tenure, pledges towards money. There's such an overlap between that work and this work. That work succeeds if this $800 million shows up every year. The tenure facility succeeds if that money is available to support all that work and so on. So I think we're all in the same fight, and a first step on that fight is making sure that this negotiation goes well in Belém.
Definitely. Thank you. And now I'll turn into Eileen, and from your philanthropic perspective, how do we shift the climate finance system to value indigenous-led, right-based solutions? And what do you see as the most urgent opportunities to move from pilot success to scalable implementations?
Sure. Thank you, and thank you to all our hosts for bringing us together, and Minister for the inspiring call to action to get us started here today. I think I'm going to borrow from Zach, right? Because I think what he said about really the reason the climate finance system should be able to embrace this shift is because it clearly is the most cost-effective way to get the solutions that we need for nature and finance. It strikes me that we talk so much in this world about scaling solutions. And many of them are very hard to scale because eventually you hit that problem of changing individual behavior, right? Getting people to choose different cars, choose different foods, choose different ways of living. This is the opposite, right? What we have here is people who are already leading and practicing in their day-to-day behavior in the places that they call home, doing everything the way that we want. And in some ways, we don't have to do the difficult part of scaling. We just have to recognize it and reward it and set up the systems that allow it, right? And I think, and we've talked about, I think the most important levers. Clearly, we can't shy away from the legal and policy advocacy that are needed to allow for tenure recognition. Some of the countries that we've been talking about that exists, some don't. And but changing those systems is going to be a pretty important pathway, I think. Hindu, you talked about mapping, right? So our foundation is based in Silicon Valley, and while I don't normally believe that technology will solve everything, I think the eyes that we have on the forest right now can tell us, right, and it can affirm for markets, for finance, that this, what we already know, right, which is that the protection is effective. I think that's a really important thing to be able to leverage and unleash. I think the targets that we're talking about around governance are pretty key. And I guess what I would say, having gone through a few rounds of this with other philanthropies, some of this is about just having that courage to leap, right? As we talked about the last round on the pledge, there was a lot, because people were taking it seriously, which was good, there was a lot of hesitation about, well, can we actually get there? And I think what we saw in this last round is just moving the bar, right, did cause people to rise. It's caused, a growth of funds that are now indigenous-led and ready to take the funds. And it's caused other money to crowd in. From a philanthropy standpoint, I also think, while philanthropy can do more, it is true that public donor budgets are constrained. It's also true that we have to find ways to keep the pressure on to keep that funding flowing, whether it's through things like TFFF or through other more traditional modes of ODA deployment. But I think we have to have all of that financing work.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Minister Lena, we've heard our friends from the philanthropy side sharing their experience and what needs to be done. how do you see government working more effectively? What kind of partnership need to be out there between the government and philanthropy? Do you have any example from Colombia or that you could share?
Sí, Colombia ya tiene una experiencia de la creación de un fondo que se llama, por ejemplo, el Fondo para la Vida. Es un fondo que puede manejar recursos del gobierno, recursos de cooperación o recursos de filantropía. Es decir, todo lo que se quiera invertir en pueblos indígenas puede ir allí. Es un fondo que se creó durante este gobierno, es relativamente nuevo, tiene 2 años y ha sido una iniciativa para que los fondos lleguen de manera más fácil y sean más asequibles a los pueblos indígenas y a los pueblos afrodescendientes y campesinos, para todos. Cada uno cada población tiene una bolsa dentro del fondo. Entonces, sin embargo, en el transcurso de estos 2 años, aún seguimos encontrando que esta iniciativa tiene mucho para corregir. Entonces, ya hemos hablado con el señor presidente para ver cómo vamos a modificar el fondo y evidentemente yo creo que aquí lo más importante es, por un lado, la confianza de entender que los pueblos y las comunidades ya estamos preparados, hace bastante tiempo estamos preparados para administrar unos recursos financieros, porque ya estamos poniendo en marcha las estructuras administrativas. Y en segundo lugar, es importante que el gobierno tenga una voluntad política. Esto es de voluntades, realmente. No hay nada más que decir. Si un gobierno se cierra a decir que no, pues no. Pero si un gobierno dice, vamos a sacarlo adelante, esto sale adelante con un equipo de personas que deseen trabajarlo y que conozcan a profundidad la estructura y el manejo de cada una de las poblaciones. Por ejemplo, en Colombia, como trabajamos con pueblos indígenas, comunidades afrodescendientes, pueblos campesinos, comunidades campesinas y comunidades raizales, cada una de ellas es un mundo diferente y a cada uno pues se le da su apartado, tiene su bolsa especial y su trato especial dentro de esa arquitectura financiera. Entonces, pienso que tenemos esa experiencia. Ese fondo pertenece al Ministerio de Ambiente, que es el que estoy manejando en este momento. Y debido a que pues también estoy allí, entiendo también que hay cuestiones que corregir y también soy consciente de que si estuviera una persona que no es indígena y que no tiene la visión y el conocimiento territorial que en este caso puedo tener yo, seguramente esto tampoco avanzaría, porque hay muchas personas que piensan, siguen creyendo que los pueblos indígenas aún necesitamos organizaciones que estén cuidándonos y manejando nuestros recursos, porque aún creen que los pueblos somos incapaces de administrar, pero nosotros lo hemos logrado, estamos lográndolo, y incluso los pueblos más alejados de las profundidades de nuestra Amazonía hoy están administrando proyectos red a la vanguardia y los recursos le llegan directamente sin pasar por el Estado, que era lo que ustedes mencionaban. ¿Qué pasa, por ejemplo, con algunos recursos? ¿Deben o no pasar por los estados? Eso es una discusión, por ejemplo, en los proyectos de carbono, que es importante que reglamentemos en todos los países, porque no están reglados los proyectos de carbono, y yo creo que tenemos que poner esa discusión sobre la mesa para que los recursos en esos programas, que es de donde van a venir muchísimos recursos y están llegando muchos recursos a los gobiernos, pues lleguen directamente a los territorios, porque si no es complicado que nosotros vayamos a subsanar las necesidades de los territorios si seguimos poniendo los filtros, ya sea por Estado o ya sea por otras entidades que no son gubernamentales.
Great. So along the same comment here, Lord Goldsmith, do you see scope for government coalitions to issue new tenure pledge for COP30?
Do I think it'll?
Yeah. Do you see
Do
any?
I think it'll happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need a lot of pressure. As we've already heard, there are donor governments who are reducing their expenditure, so the competition is even more intense, but for less resources. It's also the case that governments can often be very creative with how they define their expenditure. So I remember when I was a minister, I was asked to sign a big project off for what was classified as nature-based solutions, but honestly it was nothing of the sort. It was an industrial chicken farm. I won't go into details, but I need to say I didn't sign it off. But it's very important. I think that governments are held to to the commitments that have been made, and I think that requires a lot of pressure. So everyone here has the capacity to apply pressure in whatever way they can, and we just need to continue to do that. So I think yes, there will be a renewed pledge. I'm hoping that with the intervention of the Prince of Wales, who's he's almost a unique position of being able to convene meetings with almost anyone. And I'm so happy that he and his team have decided that this is a key focus of the work he'll be doing, not just up to COP30, but beyond. So I think that will result in non-traditional funders, that's a term that everyone uses, coming forward, putting money into this pledge. So I'm quite optimistic about it. And can I make one further point? So I was so happy to hear what we just heard about the new fund in Colombia, which I'm not familiar with other than the name. But this is a pattern which is being followed elsewhere as well. So the CAFI, for example, I don't know if we have anyone here from the Congo Basin, but the CAFI are creating what they're describing as a kind of Costa Rica-style payments for ecological system. Not from the DRC. Sorry, I said Congo. Sorry, I meant to say DRC. Apologies, not Congo Basin. Although, having said that, it will be a mechanism for the whole Congo Basin. But it will start in the DRC, which is a pretty big place to start. And it sounds very similar to the scheme that we've just heard about in Colombia. And it'll be a mechanism to get money from public and private sources directly through, so bypassing the bureaucracies, bypassing the potential for corruption, going straight into communities and community trusts and people who are already stewarding the natural environment. So I think this is a really good model. I'd love to know more about the Colombian one, but I'm excited to see this kind of principle being rolled out elsewhere as well.
Great. So Hindu, what meaningful partnership would look like then?
A meaningful partnership look like what we are doing, getting everyone in the tables with a same voice equally. So equal partners, that's the indigenous peoples, government, funders can sit all together. No one dictated to anyone, but sharing these experiences. And meaningful is also mean you accept the criticism to build better. It's not only one way to dictate. And that's what the earlier partnership happened. Because those who get the money, they dictate where the money can go and how the money can be used. And they call donors and the other recipients. So this way is not a meaningful partnership. But that's the things we change with the pledge. And I'm so grateful also when we have the first report. Zach, you remember you were chairing the report in COP27. So you present it as ministers. And I come there say like, no, I'm not happy because you cannot say 7% going to the indigenous peoples is a direct access finance. And it's changed. And then the funder group meet and they invited indigenous peoples. And we give you our feedback and you integrated the feedback. And we come meeting again. And that's how we are building this second pledge. So this, I can call it a meaningful partnership. But another examples, government to government. When we had the Cali COP, we sit also together with the presidency, with the Colombian negotiators, and we ended up by adopting the Indigenous Peoples body. And now with Sonia, we had also the meaningful partnership through the commission. The commission is led by the government, but it's consulted all Indigenous peoples. Everyone equally get a voice, and every input is considered. And then now we are moving together. So this is what we need to really have as a good practice. But we need to have that in a trust. Because trust is the most important. We trust each other mutually. But the time that you lose the trust, it's so hard to get it back. The trust is the most important in any partnership that you are building. So we have to say in the truth. If it's not working, we are human, we understand. But if it's working, we celebrate, we move together. But if it's not working, you are saying it's working, that will take us to the breaking, the participation, and the partnership in a meaningful. Thank you.
Great. All right. And for Michael and Eileen, from your side of philanthropy, foundation, are there policy changes that would unlock quicker disbursement of funds? Anything that you would like to share around?
Does this work? I think the question that I read was, is there an example you could cite? Yeah. Can I go to that one? That's what I was thinking about. Eileen and I had a chance to work on something 20 years ago that is called Coast Funds, that operates in British Columbia, Canada, that is essentially a trust fund that supports Indigenous First Nations in the Canadian parlance to rebuild new economy, create culture, support community. And it's been an incredible success. And it started after a conservation battle to protect something that we now call the Great Bear Rainforest, which is one of the largest extent of temperate rainforest in the world, a wonderful place that was under threat from logging and mining. And First Nations came together, environmental groups came together, and then the provincial government and the forestry industry and the national government came together and proposed creation of this thing that we now call Coast Funds, and they each contributed into it. And philanthropy had a huge role to put probably half the money in, and the provincial government and the federal government in Canada contributed the other half. Today, 15 years later, that fund is still operating. Initially, governance was shared by all the stakeholders. Today, it's really only First Nations who manage it. It's been, as they say, it's been decolonized. And First Nations manage the fund, and professional staff do the disbursements of capital. And I think it's about $5 million a year that comes out of the fund and is distributed to about 20 different First Nations groups. I think that's the model, and it works. And so what I'd like to propose is that we all go to British Columbia, spend a little bit of time on the ground, visit these folks and see how it works, because it is a real example. Since it was formed, there's been a proliferation of other funds and suggestions about others. I mean, I think the work that RRI has done to create this big global fund that could serve this purpose and disperse funds into Indigenous peoples, local communities, and some of the other regional funds like IPAS in Asia, and there's a bunch of the Amazon funds that operate. We heard a rundown of this yesterday. There's a lot of these things out there. This notion that First Nations really need some help to manage their own money is just bullshit now. it is common practice to direct money to set something up that would be regressive and go backward and push money through governments, which is a potential that we need to make sure doesn't happen with the TFFF, would be such a step back. We are way past that now, and there's lots of good experience to draw on. So.
Thank you, Michael. I think we're signing up to host a trip. But maybe just to build on Michael's example, I want to share a little bit about some of what I think philanthropy was able to do to bring that or help catalyze that opportunity. So some of the things we supported, including the Haida Nation at the time, was pressing its rights and title case. And just the fact that we could help them support that litigation was enough to keep the policy pressure on that helped the deal come together. We also saw that in a lot of these communities, conservation groups had put together conservation plans for the regions, but what we often heard was, the groups did not have their own plans, right? So really the notion of the opportunity for them to put together the consultations they needed within their own communities, to set plans that they could demonstrate as the investable plan for others to come in, both government money, but also private sector money ultimately. The tables that allowed them to work across the different communities at a larger scale. And I think importantly, the transition to the fund that, we really did have to go the step of building the trust to say we are going to push our institutions to let go of the governance constraints that were originally on it, which I think was really important. I think for me, the other maybe bigger lesson there is, for me, public philanthropic partnerships have been, in some ways, a strange and interesting thing in that somehow when we bring the money together, it often allows each party to do something that on their own and take some risks that maybe they weren't able to do originally, right? In terms of the willingness of the government to come in alongside us at a large scale and in the latest version of the Great Bear deal, provide that money directly to the indigenous leaders to allow them to program it. That's something I think that would have been hard maybe for my institution originally all by ourselves and maybe hard for the government partners, but as we've brought it together, I think it's powerful. And as we think about how we scale up finance, these philanthropic public partnerships, if they can serve that purpose, I think in trust with the communities, it can be a very useful thing.
Last question, and I know Minister Lena has to leave, but as we all know, all eyes are on COP30, right? We're all thinking about that. So what would success look like by COP30 for your government and for anybody here from your own work? What does it look like? So that will be the last question. We will wrap up, then we'll invite for the closing keynote. But Minister, if you want to reply quick before you go, that would be much appreciated.
Bueno, para la COP30 nosotros evidentemente tenemos unos puntos importantes que queremos llevar hasta allá. El primero es el punto de sinergias y es la conversación que tenemos que tener entre biodiversidad y cambio climático, que deseamos que se integre oficialmente en la agenda. Lo otro es la financiación directa para los pueblos indígenas y las otras comunidades que viven en los territorios. Lo otro es que exista una participación que sea efectiva de todos los pueblos. ¿Qué implica esto? Que también los pueblos y comunidades hagan parte de las delegaciones nacionales de todos los países para que podamos poner en el centro de la discusión a los pueblos. Hay algo muy importante y es que en las anteriores NDC no se tenía en cuenta o se tenía en cuenta en un mínimo porcentaje los aportes de los pueblos indígenas. Colombia en este momento está poniendo en el centro de la discusión a los pueblos indígenas y por lo tanto todas las NDC se están construyendo alrededor de lo que son pueblos indígenas y comunidades. Entonces, también incentivamos a los demás estados a que esto se construya de esta manera, y creo que es una COP en donde los pueblos vamos a estar en el centro de la discusión, del debate, de las decisiones, y eso le da un giro a cómo se puedan mover, digamos, la política y la construcción de la política pública internacional, y por lo tanto eso se verá reflejado en las políticas públicas nacionales y regionales y territoriales, en donde seguramente tendremos nosotros más protagonismo, los pueblos más protagonismo, y si los pueblos tienen más protagonismo y si los pueblos hacen parte de los debates, de los escenarios y de las decisiones que se tomen, vamos a tener mejores resultados, porque lo que sí está demostrado es que hasta el momento la estrategia no está funcionando, porque no estamos logrando frenar el cambio climático. ¿Por qué? Porque no hemos tenido en cuenta a los pueblos. ¿Qué hay que hacer? Incluir a los pueblos y volverlos protagonistas para que de esta manera podamos tener unos resultados eficientes. Gracias.
Thank you very much.
Tengo que retirarme porque debo volver a mi país, así que les pido excusas a todos y les agradezco a la ministra y a todos por haberme invitado, y ha sido un placer encontrarlos acá y conocerlos. Gracias y hasta pronto.
Thank you, Minister Lena, and safe travels. All right, let's do this Hindu, then we'll go and we'll finish this panel. Yeah. And again, the question is, what would success look like by COP30 for your work?
So the success for COP30 look for me is the most important reductions of the emission. This is the objective of all the climate action. COP30 is about the NDCs, how we can enhance the NDCs. Country is still didn't present their NDCs, the national determined contributions. So I'm looking for them to present their NDCs plan that can take the world to less than 1.5 degrees. And this is the most important work that all governments have to do. They have to deliver on that if they respect indigenous peoples, if they respect themselves. The second is the just transitions. So the plan after that can take us to the 1.5. The just transitions, all these negotiation items must include the right-based approach by the indigenous people rights, to do not use the exploitations of the critical minerals in the land of indigenous peoples as an excuse to go to the harming again of indigenous land or the high-spot biodiversity. It's have to respect the right, but it's have also to respond to the climate action by stopping the fossil fuel. That's the decisions of the COP28. We have to go out from it. No more money for the fossil fuel, no more subsidy for every, thank you, no more subsidy for all that is harming our nature. The third is countries have to come up from developed and developing country with a clear plan of adaptation and resilience. Our peoples are resilient. They know how to adapt. They are coping. But if we do not invest on adaptation, it's going to be more harder. And we are seeing what is happening in developed countries, they call themselves. Fire in Sweden, in LA, that we are seeing at their home are going. We are seeing the drought in Spain, the flood. All that have to end. They need also adaptation, not only the developed countries, so they have to deliver on adaptation. And one is for the indigenous peoples, why we are here. They have to deliver on finance. We are talking about the pledge for indigenous peoples. And we have the hope, that's why we are meeting, that's going to be delivered. But we need the finance for the climate from the pledge that they are having. The 1 billion a year that they have to give to the countries, they have to get it also to the ground, to the indigenous communities. Not because we are going to have the pledge, especially for indigenous peoples, that we cannot get into the other funding for climate. Because we are the solution, and this is our campaign. We are the solution. So we have to get all the access on that. Then, of course, we can celebrate the COP30 as a big success for us. Thank you.
I mean, I endorse all of that. I just think, look, I think there are two big things that this COP can and I think will succeed in doing. But the first is to remove once and for all this artificial barrier between climate and nature. If you had a policy which was entirely based on carbon, and that was your only pursuit, that would result probably in places like the Congo Basin being looted for resources in order to fuel this technological transition. So the moment you narrow your gaze to a sort of one-dimensional approach, you end up creating even bigger problems for land and people. So I really believe this is an important COP. And I think this will remove any doubt in people's mind that this is one issue, not two separate issues. The second thing, as Hindu said, is it's, yes, we need sponsor governments and philanthropists and everyone else to step up and come up with the dosh, but it's not going to be enough. Even if they do. Even if we double their contributions tomorrow, it's not going to be enough. The reason we have this problem, the reason we're having this discussion today is because there is a gigantic market failure. We don't recognize valuable things. We don't know how to price bad things like pollution and waste. And that's why, in addition to what we've been talking about so far, the TFFF, the IPLC pledge and so on, we need to look at the politics. Those subsidies, not just for fossil fuels, you're right, obviously, about that, but look at land use subsidies, $500 billion a year spent on often highly destructive land use practices. Imagine if that money was stopped and instead put towards renewal and protection. We'd have our solution right there. So the politics really matters, and equally trade. There are three, China, the UK, and Europe have all legislated already to ban the import of commodities like soy and palm oil and cattle and so on that are produced on illegally occupied land. So that legislation is already there, but not one of those places, including the UK, my country, have enacted that legislation because there's huge lobbying against them. But it should be illegal for the people that Sonia was talking about earlier, the land grabbers, the pirates coming in and stealing land. They should not be able to get their produce to market, not in a respectable way at least, not in an easy way. And that's what this legislation is designed to prevent, but it has not been enacted. So we need pressure. China needs to enact their legislation. It would be like having a bucket with a great hole in the water, putting a plug in. It would be huge, the significance of them enacting that legislation. The UK as well, we're a big consumer country, we may not be geographically big, we're a big consumer country. And of course the European Union. So pressure, we need to pressure, never take our eyes off the politics, because a lot of stuff can happen if politics goes the wrong way or the right way.
I'm going to stay on the TFF theme and just say that I think there's a possibility that we could have a major bump up in new governance structures as a result of the TFFF, and it would be a system that has to be ratified by policymakers, right? So governments are going to be involved, but it's going to recognize the primary role of indigenous peoples and local communities in achieving the outcomes that we're trying to get to. And it's also going to be in partnership with investors who care about sustainability and social benefits and good governance. And that's going to lead to a modern form of governance, a different set of actors that are really accomplishing the goals. It's not going to be consultants. It's going to be local communities, indigenous people, who are going to make it happen on the ground. We're going to need a really successful, effective satellite monitoring program for environmental degradation in the forest so that we can penalize bad actors and reward good actors and make sure that performance is being achieved on these lands. We're going to need a different kind of governance over all this system where IPs sit with governments and maybe with investors. And maybe philanthropies can even be in the room too as a sort of, stalking horse for more forward-moving action. But there's a multi-dimensional outcome here about a different kind of institutional structure that TFF will eventually become, I'm convinced, if it succeeds in being launched in the first place. But let's get as much of that at the beginning rather than wait 10 years for these evolutions to occur. Because there are a lot of people who will say, let's wait 5 years. We'll plant the money in the government agenda, in the government accounts. We'll hope some of it gets to IPLCs. Let's not worry about putting indigenous peoples in the governance structure. Let's not pay attention to those crazy ESG investors. We'll just do, investing, like real investing. I think all of those things can reach a new level of innovation and possibility that really could change the way we do things globally. There's so many parts of this that are exciting, and a lot of this has to evolve quickly over the next several months in order for all those things to happen. We're not going to get all those things, but I think we get a lot of them if we're smart about it and we all work together.
It's hard to go last because I have to say that if I could experience your COP30 as you've already described, I would be pretty happy. So maybe I'll just pick up on some of those themes. I think the reason it's so important to think about a COP where the nature and climate agendas come truly together is because it really does remind us that a just transition doesn't happen other than landing ultimately in people and place. And I think when you think about the kind of stories that people spin about pathways to get there, the ones that don't work are the ones that don't recognize that. So I think that is, what feels powerful about that. And if we can shift, I've heard, at least from this panel, at least really 3 important ways that we're shifting the financing agenda. It's basically stop the bad, right? If we can really start to turn the tide on that. I also think, as we've said, philanthropy and public dollars aren't going to be enough. So really bringing in private sector dollars to support the good, right? The investment in the things that have to happen at a much larger scale. And finally, a mechanism for standing forests and the people who protect them, right? Because that's just been something so missing in this whole climate finance system. And I hopefully we'll all get to celebrate some of these things together.
Well, you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay here because I would like to invite Clever, who, and on behalf of the Global Alliance, who played a key role in the Brazzaville Congress, but also they will be bringing the voices of indigenous people and local communities to COP30. So we would like to hear from Clever, and in the end, I will give you back the floor for one quick reflection about the whole event.
Ok, obrigado, Solange. Muito obrigado aos nossos grandes colaboradores, painelistas, na moderação de Solange, na Hindu, companheiro Zac, Michael, Ellen e nossa ministra Lena, que teve que sair. Uma contribuição muito importante para esse nosso painel, para esse nosso debate. Queria, em nome da Aliança Global, primeiramente fazer uma saudação a todos vocês que estão comparecendo nesse evento organizado em conjunto com a Aliança Global e o Ministério dos Povos Indígenas do Brasil, e fazer uma saudação especial à minha amiga, companheira de caminhada de tantas lutas, nossa ministra Sônia Guajajara, de muitas batalhas, e agora nossa parentíssima ministra dos povos indígenas no Brasil, e dizer da importância desses espaços para nós da Aliança Global, para estarmos construindo. Solange, companheiros, companheiras, todos da plenária, acho que é de suma importância o que nós vivemos nesses últimos 2 anos especificamente. Acho que o que nós estamos logrando êxito aqui neste evento, o evento que estivemos logo mais cedo pela manhã né, sendo recepcionados no Palácio de St. James pelo príncipe William, né, na realeza aqui em Londres, é fruto, né, de uma caminhada, de uma construção coletiva, não somente coletiva entre povos indígenas e comunidades locais, feito e puxado pela Aliança Global e as suas organizações membros, mas também com os nossos parceiros, aliados, com a filantropia, lideranças indígenas, a importância e o papel da contribuição das lideranças indígenas e de liderança de comunidades locais nesse processo, né, de caminhada e construção coletiva. Acho que de suma importância os resultados que nós já começamos a visualizar um pouco de mudança do cenário. Nos últimos 3 anos, aproximadamente, quando se começava muito a falar, por exemplo, no debate do financiamento direto, o que a gente vê hoje é um grande reconhecimento, não só pela filantropia, que já reconhecia isso, que são parceiros e aliados nesse processo, mas começando a ser reconhecido por líderes de governos de países, né, inclusive por líderes do setor privado, que também é um ator para esse cenário importantíssimo, para essa caminhada, no enfrentamento à crise climática e nessa caminhada rumo à COP30. Podemos ver isso muito importante na realização do Congresso em Brazzaville, do primeiro Congresso de bacias, de florestas tropicais e também de lideranças indígenas e comunidades locais de outros biomas, de outros ecossistemas, onde existem, vivem, habitam e protegem a biodiversidade desses outros ecossistemas, no Congresso em Brazzaville, agora em maio, de suma importância, a reunião de quase cerca de 400 lideranças indígenas e de comunidades locais, falando, debatendo com parceiros aliados, com atores de governos, com atores de agências das Nações Unidas presentes nesse espaço, e o quanto que fundamental foi a carta, a declaração de Brazzaville, retirada deste grande congresso, que apontou algumas direções importantes de ações concretas que precisamos seguir nessa caminhada. Acho que essa caminhada que vai até Belém, COP30, mas também para além de Belém, além de COP30, e na conexão, e a gente vem falando muito como povos indígenas, na conexão das 3 principais convenções de clima, desse debate, na proteção da biodiversidade, na proteção do clima, na proteção do meio ambiente, na proteção das pessoas, e dos ecossistemas. A Convenção da Biodiversidade, a Convenção da Desertificação e a Convenção de Clima, e o quanto que estão muito conectados essas convenções, essas COPs, nessa caminhada do que se iniciou na Colômbia no ano passado, na COP16, na Colômbia, da biodiversidade, o que caminhamos agora, rumo à COP30 em Belém, e o Congresso de Brazzaville trouxe isso como um cenário de horizonte, e o que nós temos para além da COP30 em diante. Muita missão, porque o que conseguimos construir nesses últimos 2, 3 anos e que esperamos lograr êxitos na COP30, o anúncio dos compromissos que estão sendo construídos, e é importante frisar isso, estão sendo construídos em conjunto com esses líderes, com povos indígenas e comunidades locais. Vivemos um cenário diferente de alguns anos atrás, onde atores, governos, parceiros, aliados, muitas das vezes, construíam esses processos muito alijado da participação de povos indígenas e comunidades locais. Hoje nós vivemos um cenário de fazer parte da mesa de debate, fazer parte da mesa de negociação, fazer parte do processo de cocriação, de construção, desse processo de desafios que vivemos num cenário de uma conjuntura a nível global, de crescimento de governos da extrema-direita, por exemplo, em várias regiões do planeta, crescimento das ameaças à própria crise climática, o crescimento do cenário de guerras entre países no mundo. E a gente precisa olhar para esse cenário de enfrentamento à crise climática como uma guerra que também todos nós estamos envolvidos e estamos comprometidos em enfrentar essa guerra juntos para podermos vencer o enfrentamento à crise climática e não chegarmos ao ponto, né, de ampliar a temperatura a 1,5 graus e meio, 1,5 grau, né, para podermos evitarmos uma catástrofe maior, né, para a humanidade. Então, são desafios diante de uma conjuntura onde o direito dos povos indígenas e de comunidades locais, a proteção dos territórios, também estão, né, em processo de ameaça. Então, é por isso que iniciativas como do FTFG, no anúncio, né, do avanço do compromisso do Pledge 1.0, e agora caminhando para esse novo anúncio, né, e, né, ontem estivemos no evento, inclusive, reforçando a necessidade e a importância de anunciarmos, né, do grupo do FTFG, anunciar na COP30 este compromisso, que não é só um anúncio de um compromisso financeiro, né, não é apenas a cifra em si, o valor da cifra em si que importa, mas é o quanto que esta cifra vai conseguir apoiar diretamente comunidades de povos indígenas e comunidades locais na ponta, no chão e território, para juntos enfrentarmos essa guerra de enfrentamento à crise climática. A importância da iniciativa do FCLP também no anúncio do compromisso do Pledge, do compromisso territorial, que está sendo construído, né, a várias mãos, né, com governos, e a Aliança Global vem participando de algum tempo já dentro da plataforma de povos indígenas e comunidades locais, dentro do FCLP, colaborando nesse processo para que a gente consiga arrancar, de fato, este compromisso, e há governos já sinalizando, números para esse compromisso territorial. Colômbia, Brasil, né, está trabalhando para esses anúncios também, para que chegar na COP a gente consiga alcançar esse número de 400 milhões de hectares a nível global de territórios indígenas e de comunidades locais, sendo assumido como compromisso de proteção para os próximos 10 anos, né, para frente. E, da mesma forma, a iniciativa, né, que já vem sendo, né, trabalhada e construída há aproximadamente 1 ano e meio, do TFFF, Fundo de Florestas Tropicais para Sempre, da qual a Aliança Global foi convidada a colaborar nesse processo, e estamos dando o nosso maior esforço para tentar construir, e a gente visualiza como uma oportunidade significativa do mecanismo a ser criado pelo TFFF para apoiar financeiramente, diretamente, povos indígenas e comunidades locais na ponta. E um mecanismo que está sendo construído com a participação e a cocriação de povos indígenas e comunidades locais. A gente vê nessa oportunidade como algo não somente inovador, mas que pode ser um espelho para espelhar outras iniciativas que já estão em curso, Fundo Global, Fundo de Clima, Verde de Clima Global, Fundo da Biodiversidade, de Meio Ambiente, enfim, várias outras iniciativas, para repensarem, né, o seu processo de mecanismo de financiamento direto para povos indígenas e comunidades locais, co-criando conjunto com os povos indígenas para que esses recursos cheguem diretamente na ponta. Então, a importância desses pontos que foram também ressaltados e debatidos no Congresso em Brazzaville, e está na nossa declaração, que vocês podem, né, acessar na página da Aliança Global, para ter acesso à declaração e a todos os pontos de ação que a gente vê encaminha rumo à COP30. É um cenário que nós precisamos, né, trabalhar para sermos muito ambiciosos. A gente enxerga muitas oportunidades nesse cenário. A COP30 é uma janela de oportunidade que nós não podemos deixar escapar. E eu falo nós, não somente nós, povos indígenas, todos nós, né, da filantropia, dos governos, né, do próprio setor privado também, né, povos indígenas, comunidades locais, não podemos deixar escapar essa janela de oportunidade da COP30, tanto pela importância que a COP vai ter na construção das novas NDCs, das novas contribuições nacionalmente determinadas dos países que vão anunciar seus compromissos para os próximos 10 anos, mas pela importância que o anúncio, os compromissos assumidos, vão ter daqui em diante, da COP em diante, né, para efetivarmos, de fato, ações concretas na ponta e no território. E, nesse sentido, né, no debate, por exemplo, sobre financiamento direto, a gente vê muitas oportunidades de potencializar os mecanismos de governança de fundos indígenas próprios, né, dos povos indígenas e comunidades locais. Já há vários exemplos e vários cenários que estão, de fundos indígenas, de comunidades locais que estão já funcionando. Você pega o exemplo do Brasil, Fundo de Aguatá, a nível nacional, Fundo Podália, a nível da Amazônia brasileira, a nível territorial local, Fundo Rutã, Fundo Firne, Fundo Pacará, enfim, vários outros fundos. Vamos para a região da Ásia, Fundo ADPs, Fundo Nusantara, Mesoamérica, Fundo Territorial Mesoamericano, Repaliac no Congo, na Bacia do Congo, também criando o fundo da Repaliac, mas outras iniciativas de fundos que já estão atuando e operando a nível local. Então, os povos indígenas e as comunidades locais estão preparados com os seus mecanismos próprios, não somente para receber o financiamento direto, mas também para, em conjunto, podermos fazer com que as ações concretas cheguem na ponta do território para a proteção de direitos, para a proteção dos territórios, para a garantia da proteção dessa biodiversidade do planeta. A gente está falando, logo mais cedo no evento, no Palácio de St. James, estava comentando sobre o tamanho da articulação política que a Aliança Global tem na sua rede. Nós estamos falando de uma aliança global que está espalhada em 24 países, da Bacia do Congo, da Bacia Amazônica, da Mesoamérica, na Bacia Boreal da Indonésia, enfim, na Ásia, no Brasil e em outros ecossistemas. Estamos falando de uma porcentagem, de um número de hectares de bosque, florestas protegidas por esses povos indígenas e comunidades locais, que chega a quase 1 bilhão de hectares. Nós estamos falando de uma população que um pouco mais de 35 milhões de pessoas, de povos indígenas e comunidades locais. Então, a importância do trabalho que a Aliança Global, e junto com a filantropia, com parceiros, aliados de governos também, vimos fazendo junto para caminharmos rumo à COP30 com essas nossas ambições concretas para chegarmos na COP e esses compromissos sejam anunciados e sejam efetivamente implementados a partir da COP30. Sabemos que todos já reconhecem a importância dos povos indígenas e dos seus territórios e também das comunidades locais na contribuição milenarmente que fazem para a humanidade na proteção dessa grande biodiversidade do planeta e, nesses tempos atuais, no enfrentamento à crise climática. Então, a importância de, da COP em diante, seguirmos com esse compromisso ambiciosos e, com a participação, e garantir que essa participação dos povos indígenas chegue na COP de uma forma bem participativa e incisiva. Estamos participando, a convite da ministra Sônia, que preside o Ciclo dos Povos, participando da Comissão Internacional de Povos Indígenas, para justamente garantir não somente essa participação na construção da participação nesse espaço, mas também nos processos de debate e de diálogo nas negociações principais sobre os temas relacionados aos povos indígenas. Bem, pessoal, acho que precisamos avançar, não podemos recuar. Chegamos muito longe, chegamos juntos, estamos juntos nessa caminhada, temos muito ainda a construir pela frente. A gente vê muita sinergia nessas três iniciativas que comentei, do TFFF, FCLP e do FTFG. Vemos como uma grande oportunidade a iniciativa do TFFF e mesmo com muito pé no chão, sabendo que os resultados, possivelmente, pós-COP, podem chegar só daqui a 3, 5 anos para frente, e por isso que a sinergia entre essas iniciativas e esses mecanismos, a importância de ser uma somatória de esforços para garantir que, já a partir da COP, mesmo, por exemplo, com o resultado do TFFF só lá para frente, mas já a partir da COP, ter os compromissos assumidos e começarem a ser implementados imediatamente a partir de um conjunto de ações coordenada e de sinergia entre esses mecanismos e outros. Então, não podemos recuar, seguimos em frente, estamos juntos nessa caminhada. A Aliança Global de Comunidade e Território está sempre solidária e muito próxima desse debate, querendo acompanhar todos juntos com vocês nessa caminhada e dizer que a resposta somos nós para essa caminhada. A resposta somos nós, a campanha da Aliança Global não é só dizer que nós, povos indígenas, somos a resposta, mas todos nós, filantropia, parceiros, aliados, governos, líderes globais, setor privado, todos nós que estamos preocupados com o futuro da humanidade, com o futuro do planeta, com o futuro das nossas futuras gerações, somos a resposta para esse processo. Então, a resposta somos nós. Muito obrigado.
Clever. Thank you very much, Clever. We're almost at the end of this amazing panel. So what I would like to do is to come back to our panelists and just 1 minute each to tell us one key takeaway, either from this event or from the whole London Climate Week. Because what I'm seeing seems like London Climate Week is taking over New York Climate Week. But September will tell, we'll see. But what has been happening here this week has been amazing. So one takeaway and one specific action you would hope to see before COP30. Then after that, I'll give back the floor to Clever, because this event has been organized by JTC and the minister, Sonia, and her ministry. So just to see any final word that you would like to add to this conversation. Yeah, at the end. But let's start from there. Eileen, and we'll come over here.
Well, I guess like many of us in this room, we've probably attended a few too many climate weeks and a few too many COPs. But I do sometimes reflect that the one thing that's nice is while there are many agendas that you're on that you feel like you don't see the progress, I would reflect that in this conversation, I feel like I can see the progress, and it's been meaningful in the last few years, and that's exciting, and I feel really good about that. As far as one action, I guess we've been talking a lot about Pledge 2.0. I think we're almost there, so let's just get that one over the finish line in a way that feels, as many people have said, about not just the scale of resources, but also the quality.
Okay. I think the human brain has a hard time keeping a lot of things in the head at one time. And when you think about these huge topics like climate, nature, biodiversity, whatever you choose to call it, economic community development, indigenous people, local communities, that sounds like too artificial a term to me, having spent time with these amazing people who are just so special and strong and powerful. But I think one of the things that I'm seeing is a coming together of those universes into a larger system. And that is amazing. And I don't think we should underestimate how difficult it is for people to take all of that on board and think about it together. But I see it happening. It's what's been happening in London. And that is a success. That is a massive success. And it gives me some hope that we'll get to the good places at COP30. So that's great. And just the last thing I want to just say is I'm so grateful to the remarkable leaders that are here. You are so generous. Thank you for what you do to protect the planet, and thank you for being such amazing people and friends. So my heart is full. I'll pass this on.
Well said, Michael. And we were talking about risk earlier, and I've had the great privilege of working with a lot of philanthropic organizations, and I love the fact that I'm sitting next to two people from the world of philanthropy who do take risks. They know who they can trust, they know who perhaps to give a wide berth to, and we need to see a lot more of that. There's another person over there, the new foundation, Jacobs Futura Foundation, Veronica. I love the fact that I think it was their first grant was to the GATS to ensure that you guys, Juanca and co, have a seat at the table in the discussions around the TFFF. That was also a great instinctive gesture, more than a gesture, but investment by a new foundation. So I think we are beginning to see more and more of that. I'm going to make, sorry, that was not your question. Your question, he completely threw me then. Michael, what are you doing? I think, look, a lot of COPs in these international events, they feel a bit humdrum, box ticking, routine. This feels very different. COP30 feels very different. And I know it's dangerous to project too much hope on one event, but it's hard not to, because there is such potential to deliver so much change, even notwithstanding it's only 5 months away. So the one action is different for everyone in this room. We all have things that we can do. If we're philanthropists, we can spend money better. We can encourage others to spend money better, to trust IPLC organizations. If we're connected with politicians, as I am, we lobby. We try and get governments, decision makers into the best possible place. But each and every one of us has something we can do. And the key is that we don't lose one day between now and COP30. If there's something we can do, we just do it there and then, and not waste this opportunity, because it's a huge one. Thank you very much, everyone.
This is the hard one, and don't make me cry because you did. So that's really hard to see, but thank you for really all what you are doing, three of you. So my takeaway is like, wow, what a week, and what a day from the morning to here, and what a panel, because usually we do the panel, you come, you have 5 minutes, you speak, the moderator is looking in her watch to tell you, wrap up, wrap up, wrap up. But we get the time to really share a little bit. And we get the time, I'm very happy to get the cautions of what I'm doing on the ground, not only what you are doing up there. So this is like a great takeaway. And how we are so lucky to be in London for those of us who were in Bonn before. Believe me, there is still talking about full stop, comma, arguing about that for 10 days while we are designing the real action that the world needs, that the people at home waiting for us and expecting. So this is a great takeaway. We need more and more those kind of action. Of course, London Climate Week make the bar higher. Not sure about New York, as you said, coming from my country of Chad, that like no visa and the rest of the many countries, but we still have a hope because you are all here. Doesn't matter that you come from US or not, but you are here in London and working with Indigenous peoples for action. So the action for me that I wanted to ask you, open your heart, trust Indigenous peoples, and we can make it together. We can do it. And as my brother said, our campaign is, we are the answer. And if we are the answer, trust us, we can make it. And of course, COP30 will be the best one. Even we put higher everything, as you well said. We wanted to achieve so big. We are not going to get everything. We cannot put pressure on you, Sonia, but we will do it all together. Trust us, we will be with you, and we will handle it up to make the COP30 a better than many others. Thank you.
Thank you. What a panel, right? But thank you very much to all the panelists. It's been great. And now I would like to give the floor to...
Maybe say, before that, maybe say thank you to Solange. So, Solange, yeah. You are the best.
Solange, por favor. Vou repetir um pouco o que Rindu falou, do painel ser um painel de dedicarmos bastante tempo para trazermos as ideias, o que estamos fazendo. Isso é legal. Eu me lembrei de Solange no congresso em Brazzaville, olhava para mim, e tempo para acabar, tempo para finalizar. Solange... E aqui, em nenhum momento, ela olhou para mim e pediu para finalizar. Mas é importante, acho que precisamos, talvez... Acho que uma primeira coisa, talvez repetir este painel, e aí talvez com muito mais avanços, na COP30. Já trazendo os resultados de cada tema, de cada ação dessas que estão sendo propostas, e a gente poder ter um painel como esse na COP30, para a gente organizar conjuntamente. A Aliança Global se coloca novamente super à disposição para a gente repetir novamente esse momento. Bom, acho que temos desafios enormes, temos construções que estão sendo muito bem feitas e construídas, com a participação envolvendo os povos indígenas e comunidades locais. Vamos chegar na COP com possíveis muitos bons resultados a serem anunciados. E o que eu traria aqui também para a nossa reflexão, e aí principalmente para nós, povos indígenas, a gente tem um acúmulo de demandas, que a gente quer os resultados imediatos para agora, para ontem, porque não espera a demarcação dos territórios, não espera a proteção da vida das lideranças, não espera o enfrentamento à crise climática, que é agora, não dá para esperar. Mas muitas das ações que estão sendo construídas podem demorar algum tempo para serem logrados frutos dos êxitos concretos disso. Mas tenhamos todos nós aqui a certeza de que o que cada um de nós que estamos fazendo agora, que a gente pode não estar lá na frente logrando esse êxito, vamos ter lembrados por estar contribuindo e ajudando em um processo que busca não somente garantir direitos de povos indígenas e comunidades locais, proteger territórios, mas vamos ser lembrados por termos lutado, estarmos lutando para a proteção da vida de todos nós nesse planeta. Então, a COP30 tem uma expectativa enorme. Acho que temos que lutar conjuntamente todos nós para que essas expectativas sejam concretizadas e anunciadas, para que a gente não tenha uma frustração na COP30, porque viemos aí de uma caminhada longa de alguns anos, que com muita aposta na expectativa na COP30 para esses resultados. E se a gente consegue juntos nos darmos a mão e seguirmos nessa caminhada, vamos conseguir lograr esses êxitos dos compromissos na COP e seguir adiante pós-COP para a gente conseguir concretizar de fato esse compromisso. Então, queria deixar essa mensagem e reforçar o convite. Imagino que a grande maioria dos que está aqui vai estar na COP30, em Belém, para a gente estar juntos nesse debate rumo à COP, enfrentamento aí à crise climática e todos nós juntos. Obrigado.